I'm Safia Usmani, and this is Fulbright Women Podcast Season 2. We're excited to bring to you 20 new brilliant women who are pushing the boundaries in their fields and lives and serving as inspirations to so many around them. Today, we have Eman Niazi with us. Eman works in mental health as a therapist. She graduated from NYU Silver School of Social Work in 2014 with a master's in social work and focus on a clinical track. She's a clinical social worker and has around a decade's experience of helping people with their mental health challenges. Hi, Eman. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for asking. There's so many things that I want to start, to just unpack with you about mental health. But I guess my first question, Eman, would be, what got you inclined towards mental health?
So I'd always wanted to do medicine. It was something that I wanted to do since I was 5 years old. And then somehow I never got into the med school that I wanted to. And I decided that I still wanted to help people, as cliched as that may sound. And that kind of the next kind of path that I saw for myself was mental health. And then since my A-level, so just right after I graduated my A-levels, that was.
So when you started getting academically trained in mental health, let's just say that, what were some of the surprising lessons, the first surprising lessons that you understood about the mental health space, mental health practice that made you go like, wow?
That's a really good question. I think one of the first, one of my first few teachers in psychology, and we were studying the DSM, and this was in Pakistan, we were studying the DSM. She's like, as you read through these symptoms, and the DSM is the diagnostic and statistical manual for mental disorders. And she said, as you read through a lot of these symptoms, they'll feel true for you or for people in your life. And that doesn't mean you have a full-blown disorder, but it just means that that's how relatable they are. So a lot of those symptoms, as you kind of study them and as you, read through them, you see just how common and how prevalent they are. And it may not be to the extent of meeting the criteria for a full-blown disorder, but I think that was an aha moment for me.
This is so funny as well, actually, because so many people, don't we find so many people, including us, when we get sick or something and we Google something, right? One of the things that everyone says, just don't Google it, right? Because then it feels like you have everything wrong in your body going on, right? Why does this really happen? Why do we just relate to everything and go like, oh, I might have cancer?
Well, I think it depends on just how you look at the world. But yeah, I think we're always looking for explanations to explain why we feel the way that we feel. I've had a chronic headache for a week. This would explain it, So we're always looking, and I think that's also the power of mental health diagnoses. So it's like a double-edged sword. Being told that you have depression is a label as well, but it's also like a relief for a lot of people. Okay, this explains why I have not been able to be fully functional all of my life, or this explains why I struggle to get out of bed in the morning. So I think we always want an explanation or a reason to explain why we're feeling the way we're feeling, especially when we're feeling not right.
Yeah. Oh, as an expert, I'm sure, you would know better that each different condition requires a different kind of, understanding and treatment and a process. But I do remember when we were talking earlier, you mentioned something that is at the heart of all kind of processes, which is building deep relationships and creating safe spaces. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so I think the therapeutic relationship in the therapy room or between a therapist and their client is one of the biggest factors involved in the successful treatment or in the successful work with the client. I think those therapeutic relationships and that therapeutic alliance is so powerful because a lot of times just being able to create a safe space can be reparative for people. It can help them to regain faith in themselves. It can help them to reestablish connection with themselves and connection that is positive. So having a positive, reinforcing, supportive, safe relationship is really, really healing and can be really, really powerful. And so, not to diminish the role of therapists and mental health practitioners, but any safe relationship, any positive relationship like that, like it could be with a teacher, it could be with a peer, it could be with a sibling, those are actually protective, and kind of promote positive mental health for
Hmm.
people.
Hmm. Interesting that you say that, because don't we know, we as a society in Pakistan take pride in us being very communal and having like so many rishtes and relationships. You can just go talk to anyone, right? All of
Yeah.
that pride aside, when I was doing my research, I saw that Pakistan still has one of the poorest, mental health indicators in the world. What's happening here?
I think, yes, we are a collectivist culture, and yes, we do value like family relationships and friend relationships and all of those other relationships as well. But there are also like deep undercurrents to that. There's a lack of openness. There's a lot of shame associated with um, not being okay. There's a lot of shame associated with uh, mental health issues. There's a lot of shame associated with any kind of struggle, right? So if a woman is struggling in her marriage, it's something that she will not talk about because society tells her not to talk about it. I think the idea of tolerance or bardasht comes up, and it's like, you know, um, you should. I mean, if you are a good wife, then you will tolerate X, Y, Z. And so I think that the safe space. I think that while we do have really meaningful and powerful family relationships, they may not always be safe because there is an element of judgment. There is a lack of safety where you don't know if you will be accepted for everything that you want to share. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
It does, it does. And while we, it's like the misplacement of our pride and shame, really, because
Yeah.
we take also, you talked about all the things that we are ashamed of, right? And then we also take pride in being a conformist society, right? You have to conform, you have to fit in. For that, you have to suffocate yourself, you have to suppress all your emotions, who you really are. That must be, to live your life really against your own being, must be so traumatic.
I think that's a really great question. And I think that's a really great point. Um, we don't really have a lot of freedom in our society to explore aspects of ourselves and our
Mm,
personalities that may digress and diverge from, this mainstream idea of who we should be.
mm,
That goes for sexuality, that goes for career path, that goes for, walking away from a marriage when it is unhappy or abusive. That goes for calling out abusive family members. And when I say abusive, I mean physically, emotionally, sexually, anyway. Um, we don't create space for those difficult conversations. We don't create space for anything that digresses from that ideal
mm,
that we've
mm.
set, those boxes that we have.
Yeah. And it is so prevalent. And I keep coming back to our society because that's where we live, right? But it is so prevalent. There's this word that you just use, abusive relationships. A lot of us are going through them. But the thing is, we don't even know we're going through abuse, right? So, can you like just identify some of the markers that could be counted as abuse in relationships? These could be relationships with our parents, within our house, with our siblings, with our partners, whatsoever, with our teachers, whoever. But some markers would help.
So I think some of the major ones are, and I'd like to also bring up the idea of gaslighting. So um, it's a form of abuse in that it forces you to question your own self and your own reality, right? So how basically abuse propagates is, number one, it completely diminishes a person's self-esteem. So it breaks people down, it breaks you down, right? It when somebody in your life is constantly breaking you down, tearing you down, forcing you to question yourself, forcing you to question your reality, telling you you're crazy. And these are the kind of more insidious forms of abuse that are hard to identify. Obviously, with physical abuse and sexual abuse, it's a little bit different. But in relationships where somebody is trying to control you, somebody is trying to diminish your reality or question your reality, um, or question you, those are all markers for abuse. Also, where you feel unsafe, a relationship that you feel unsafe in, where you feel like you can't be your true self, where you feel like you can't express your true self, where you have physical, a lot of times, responses to being around that person. So a lot of times people will have, get sweaty palms when they're around somebody who's abusive or around somebody who they have a toxic relationship with. They might, feel nauseous. They might feel their heart racing. And those are,
Anxious.
again, yeah, or anxious. They might feel their thoughts clouded. They might feel brain fog. So those are all kind of physical manifestations of experiencing abuse.
Again, you bring up so many different ideas, and all of them are so interesting. And I get like 10 questions in my head, but then I have
Yeah.
to just ask one at a time. You started this response by saying that in an abusive relationship, the abuser tends to try to break your self-esteem, right? And I kind of want to take a step back from that. In our society, especially women, everyone, but especially women, they don't even often have an idea what self-esteem really is. How can they build their self-esteem so that later on when someone's attacking it, they can actually know, okay, my self-esteem is being attacked and it is being, someone's trying to break it. How do you build it?
But I think a big part of that is just having independence. And I think that's why women are always looked at as the wife of, the daughter of, the sister of. And so there's very little paths to independence, whether that is financial independence, whether that is physical independence, the independence to move around, to have mobility, to, follow a career path, to spend their own money. A lot of times women are,
To
so
laugh
I think,
out loud, to sit the way they want, to eat whatever they want,
yeah,
everything.
yeah. So I think fostering and building independence is a key part, and empowering women is a key part. And I think it's important to notice, though, and it's important to bring up that our generation, or at least now, there are a lot of conversations around empowering women, around building that independence, around creating space for independent thought, independent action, independent finances, and all of those things. And so I find that heartening, and I hope that's a sign of change.
Mm-hmm. There's one more thing. We also have like these very toxic definitions of respect, right? Respect means that disagreement is mostly considered as disrespecting in our families, right? What is that notion really of respect, right? Where did that come from? And how can people just create that differentiation between, that you can disagree with your parents, but respectfully so, and without really, feeling like you're disrespecting them. Sometimes what happens is, as daughters maybe, or as wives, हमारे minds में इतना ये ingrain होता है कि, oh, you cannot say a word against what you're
Yeah,
being asked to do because that is disrespect.
yeah. No, I agree with you, and I think I understand exactly what you mean. I think we conflate and equate respect with obedience. So if you respect me, you will obey me, right? And they're two very different things. You can respect somebody, love somebody with all your heart, but still have very different views and have a very different outlook to the world. But I think in our culture especially, we kind of conflate the two, especially with elders, right? So if you respect somebody, then you must obey them. You cannot set boundaries with them. You cannot tell them no. You cannot disagree with them, because those are all seen as signs of lack of respect.
Mhm.
Whereas in actuality, relationships are healthier and more respectful, mutually respectful, when there are effective boundaries in place. When you do have effective communication in place where you're able to say, I expect this from you and I would like this from you. But I think that because we conflate obedience and respect, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. And we do see that, so many, as we grow, right, we start noticing that so many of our relationships really get destroyed or get broken because of some suppressed trauma that we have. A lot of people carried, I've heard this a lot in the past couple of years, childhood traumas, right? And how they say that a lot of what we're doing stems from our childhood traumas. if child I do want you to expand on childhood trauma. And then, keeping that in mind, do you have a recommendation or suggestion as to what is the perfect age, the right age for people to start, seeking therapy, let's just say?
So I think I agree with you 1000%. Our childhoods do shape where we shape our future mental health, shape our future success, and shape our future relationships. Attachment theory says that your early childhood relationships, so even before you're 2 years old, actually determine your long-term success. That's not to say that if you had a really bad, early childhood experience, you're never going to be successful, but it definitely does determine it. So I think that in terms of childhood trauma, and a study that I love to talk about is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and it was a huge study, and it basically explores adverse experiences that people experience under the age of 18, up to the age of 18. So parental divorce is an adverse childhood experience that can be traumatic. Having a parent who suffers from a mental illness, depression, and is on depression medication is an adverse childhood experience that is counted as traumatic. Having your parents separate or even fight is an adverse childhood experience that constitutes trauma. Having parents be growing up in a physically or emotionally abusive household is also traumatic. So all of these experiences impact our mental health, impact our wellness, and impact how we relate with the world. So having childhood trauma definitely impacts your mental health, of course, but also your relationships in life, right? So when you have those experiences, it becomes harder to trust the world. It becomes harder to have meaningful relationships because there's an inherent lack of trust. A lot of times, this is something that is unconscious, that we don't realize. But because our experiences of the world are so fraught with trauma and so fraught with difficulty, we don't trust the world. And because we don't trust the world, it's like you're walking on eggshells all the time. And it's not that people are consciously aware of that. It's not that if you experience trauma, you're aware of it, but it comes up, it manifests in different ways. You may not apply to a high-powered job because you think, oh, I'm not going to get it. I'm not good enough for it. And it's not that you're not good enough for it. It's just that your childhood experiences or your childhood trauma has created so much shame and so much self-doubt and so much mistrust of the world and of yourself that you start to believe that. So I think this comes back to the self-esteem concept and the idea of like women and self-esteem. Is a lot of times because, and women particularly, experience trauma in different ways, is you learn to doubt yourself constantly.
Yeah. So I guess I want to go back to that question as to what do you think then is the right age to start, learning, seeking therapy, or learning how to deal with your emotions and deal with the external stresses that come with that. I would like to also ask you, and these questions go hand in hand, that shouldn't our schools really have some kind of mental health facilities for kids on a daily basis that they could, access to? Are these also the conversations you have in your, community with your peers?
Yeah. So in answer to your first question, I think the youngest client that I've ever had has been maybe 5. Yeah, I'm going to say 5. And so therapy at different ages looks different. With kids, with little ones, it's a lot of play therapy, and the goal at that age and at any age really, is helping to identify your emotions, helping to identify what you're feeling. And I think that's something that even adults and struggle with. You ask somebody, what do you feel about this, and they'll give you a million thoughts, but they'll struggle with giving you the feeling. Oh, I think that she shouldn't have done this, or I think that she shouldn't have behaved that way, but not, I feel betrayed, or I feel really hurt. So emotional identification and regulation, it's in order to regulate your emotions, it's important for you to understand what your emotions are. It's important for you to be able to identify them. So for children, you do that through play therapy. What do you think this doll is feeling right now? This doll's mom just got mad at her. What do you think she's feeling? And that's how you kind of do it with children. And then obviously as you grow older. And in answer to your second question, I think that it would be wonderful and incredible if we were able to have mental health facilities at schools, mental health facilities at workspaces, and if we were also able to have those conversations with teachers, with educators, with employers, with human resources, about what the red flags are, or what things to look out for in terms of mental health issues, and how do mental health issues present themselves? What are the red flags? And for them to be trained in, or have an understanding of what mental health first aid looks like. So if a child isn't coming to school for, or if a child is absent frequently, asking why is this child absent frequently? What's going on at home? Or if a child develops, a new habit like nail biting all of a sudden, has anything happened at home? Or if a super confident child all of a sudden closes up, having those conversations and saying what happened. But also having that lens with which to look at children and say, okay, these could be red flags, or this could be a marker. Or if a child who's been doing kind of average at school and all of a sudden starts getting grades in the 90s, I would ask, I'd be like, what's going on at home? There's been a change in behavior. What's going on? So yeah, these are conversations that we do have with my peers, with whenever we talk about it. This, and also kind of branching off from here, but the need for having coordination across the different fields, or the different fields of practice in mental health. So psychiatrists, counselors, psychologists, social workers, all of those fields. I think there's a real need for coordination and communication across those fields.
Interesting. So what I get from this is that, you can start your therapy from as early age as 5, or even, I don't know, younger than that, should the need be. And what requires for that is for the adults around the kids to be more observant and, open for communication, so that they feel like it's a safe space for them, right? I kind of want to go back to the very first question we started with this conversation with, where you said, again, safe space and, relationships where the kids or whoever it is feel safe to open up, right? Then Iman, I've also heard this thing, how therapists, you cannot go to your own sister as a therapist, right? What is that then? Because then I feel like isn't it like a bit confusing, because you're saying any space that is a safe space, even if it's in the family, in relationships, you can, discuss and whatever, right? But then we're actively, as therapists, told not to take in your friends or your family members as your clients. Why is that?
I think you bring up a great point there, and I think I'd like to definitely draw the distinction. So a positive, safe relationship can be protective for your mental health, but it is not a therapeutic relationship. It acts as a protective factor for you. So if you're undergoing stress, that, like, if I have a great relationship with my sister, for example, it may help me to be able to manage the stressors in my life better. It may act as a protective factor for me, if from developing, let's say, a full-blown anxiety disorder or a full-blown panic attack. But it is not a therapeutic relationship. And I think the difference there is what makes a therapeutic relationship is that relationship is only about the client. So when I'm talking to my clients, the entire time I'm talking to them, that time is about them. It's not about me. It's not a two-way street in that I'm not bringing my problems to the table. I'm being present for them. It is also different, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I've got so many good friends, I don't need to go to therapy, or I've got a great relationship with my family, I don't need to go to therapy. Yeah, I go and share everything with my husband, or I go and share everything with my parents, so I don't need therapy. The therapeutic relationship is very, very different in that it does provide a safe space, but it provides a safe space for you to talk about whatever you need, and for you to explore your emotions in a way that challenges you also, in a way that helps you to understand unconscious processes that are occurring for you that you may not be aware of, in a way that helps you to explore your issues in a non-judgmental space.
Yeah.
So with a friend or with a sister, you might be apprehensive of sharing something because you might be apprehensive of their judgment. You might be apprehensive about what they'll think. You might be like, oh my God, now she's going to start giving me advice. A therapeutic relationship is also not based on advice. Your therapist should never, or your mental health practitioner should never give you advice. Should never tell you, this is what I think you should do. And I think that's how it's different, and in lots of other ways as well. So I never want to underscore the importance of the therapeutic alliance and the therapeutic relationship, but having positive relationships in your life is a protective factor. Just like walking every day is a protective factor from developing diabetes.
So okay, I get it. The importance of therapeutic relationships, right? And importance of therapy and seeking a mental health practitioner who can help you out with your mental health challenges, right? I get it. But then, Eman, Pakistan has one of the poorest mental health indicators, right? But not enough psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health practitioners. So then there is a massive treatment gap. And so now at the end of the day, then one wonders, will the majority of our people's mental health remain untreated then?
I think that's a really valid point, a really great point. It is a huge challenge. I think the only way to address it is to have more people come to mental health, work in mental health, but also to create an awareness around the importance of mental health. And I think, again, there are small steps being taken in that area where, social media, there are huge there are frequent conversations about the importance of mental health on social media groups, on Facebook groups and stuff. People are always talking about mental health, toxic relationships, etc., etc. But there is a huge gap, and I think, again, not to underscore the importance of properly trained mental health practitioners, I think having training in mental health first aid for doctors, for nurses, for teachers, for educators, for employers, for HR, that would help. It would help build an awareness, or it would help start an understanding of mental health. Like how we have all these public health campaigns on diabetes, or these days the radio is always playing recordings about zinc and the importance of taking zinc.
I get it. I get what you're saying, because it would serve as, it's just basically telling everyone to be kinder and more considerate of everyone around you, right?
But it's also telling people that mental health is important. It is real. And then as people start hearing it, and as kids start hearing it, it's something that people will think about, okay, well, maybe I want to study it. Maybe I want to go into it. Right now, because it's something that people talk about so infrequently. And when we do talk about mental health, we immediately think like, oh, it's like somebody who is severely debilitated, or somebody who, is in an inpatient facility, or, can't really communicate properly, like that's the first response that a lot of people will have.
And the second response to that is basically, saying either those people who are severely, mentally ill, they should need these services, or someone who's super privileged and has really no stress in life would tend to delve into these things. Like, it's not for us.
Exactly. Like it doesn't impact us, right? It doesn't impact the larger chunk of society. It's like either you're like right here or you're right here. Either you're completely far gone or you're not. And so I think having those conversations around mental health will not only like create an awareness of the importance of mental health, but it will also help people move towards it as a profession and move towards it as, okay, this is something I might want to do.
Mm-hmm. But Iman, there's another thing that I'm thinking about, right? So a large portion of the society does just think of it as, a privileged kind of a thing that only privileged people do because, they have the money for it or they have the time for it. I'm just busy with my life's issues. I have to go deal with them first, right? But then let's talk about the price point of the therapy that we get in Pakistan, right? I can speak for Karachi. And with that, I guess it goes hand in hand of the quality of therapists that are out there, because sometimes I've also seen so many people who feel like they have nothing better to do would go do a diploma and sit as, therapist and, charge like what, 5,000 per hour, and won't really provide value to the client, right? So people who are really trying to take that money out of their whatever, cycle to actually put into their therapy, at the end of the day come back disappointed saying, I didn't really get anything out of it and it's expensive for me. Talk about that.
So I think a really important thing is that when we go to a doctor, we have no shame in asking, like, where did this doctor go to med school, or where did they get their training? And doctors have their certifications up behind them, they have their fellowships up behind them, and so you can see everything. And the doctor's office, or the reception at the doctor's office will tell you, or you'll have all of those diplomas up there. I think when you go to a therapist or a mental health practitioner, as a consumer, always ask, what is your training? Where have you trained? How many hours of training do you have? What are the ethics that you follow? How can I ensure? How do I know that what I share here is confidential? Can you assure me about confidentiality? And that's something that I feel every person should feel comfortable asking. Every person should feel comfortable kind of exploring, so that you know that the person I'm going to, the person that I'm trusting myself with when I am most vulnerable, is someone I actually can trust and is someone who is qualified to help me. I think a lot of Fulbrighters actually have been working on this and have been working on developing a platform. There's a website, www.counseling.pk, set up by ex-Fulbrighters. And what it's trying to do is have people who are vetted be on that platform. Again, there are not as many people on it, and like you said, there is a gap, like, because we don't have as many practitioners as there is demand. But platforms like that help, because that whenever I'm referring somebody, I'll tell them, go on counseling.pk, find someone, and reach out to them, because everyone on it is vetted. The idea is, you're a consumer, and this is something I tell all my clients, you are paying for a service. And if you are not getting what you need, feel free to have those conversations. If you've been coming to therapy for 4 sessions or 5 sessions and you feel like it's going nowhere, you feel like it's not helping you, have those conversations. Ask where your therapist is trained. Know what you want from your therapist, right? So if your therapist is giving you advice, that's a red flag. If your therapist is trying to be your friend, that's a red flag. If your therapist is oversharing about their life, that's a red flag. You're not there to help them. They're there to help you.
Interesting that you answered it yourself, because my next question was really about, putting up some bullet points as to what are some of the red flags that we should look for in our therapist. Thank you for answering that. One last question.
Well, I could add on to that, I think.
Please do. Go ahead.
So yeah, if your therapist is giving you advice and telling you what you should do, if your therapist is telling you not to take medication when you are on medication, or is interfering with something that a psychiatrist has given you, that's a red flag, and I would explore it. If they're trying to be your friend, that's a red flag. If they're oversharing and spending a lot of times, just like a lot of your session talking only about themselves, that's a red flag. Again, this is your time, your space, and it has to be about you. If you're feeling disempowered after therapy or in your therapy sessions, if you're feeling disempowered, that's a red flag.
What are some of the signs that I could know that, oh my God, I'm feeling disempowered right now? How do I find out I'm feeling disempowered?
When you feel like you can't make a decision on your own, or if you feel like, I was making decisions perfectly fine before and now somehow I can't. Or if you feel like you're starting to doubt yourself more, you're starting to question yourself more. If you feel like you're not comfortable with doing things on your own, if you were in the past. And again, this may be an overly simplified answer, but things like that.
Dealing with so many mental health issues, so many different kind of clients, genders, ages, everything, right? One imagines this would all must be taking a toll on your own mental health. How do you deal with that? Is there a strategy there?
I think my first few years in practice, I definitely struggled a lot. You definitely do. Again, it's human relationships, right? No matter what you do absorb a lot of what you hear. You do find yourself worrying about your clients. You do find yourself thinking about them, at night, in the morning. You do take away a lot of stuff from the sessions that you're in. It does cause burnout, it does cause stress, and it does impact your mental health, absolutely. I think something that really helps is supervision. So being in supervision yourself. I think another thing that really, really helps is knowing when you're burning out, knowing when you're taking on too much, and being able to take time away. Being able to, give yourself some time and space to recharge, to reset. That really, really helps. I think also just giving yourself time and space to decompress after your workday. And then again, while yes, supervision is incredible, but peer supervision. So being able to talk to your peers and be like, this was a really tough week, or this is something I'm really struggling with, or, this was really hard to hear. And that can be a little bit of a struggle because you have to be mindful of confidentiality constantly. So it's hard. And I think that also is especially hard because a lot of times, and especially I'm in Islamabad, and especially in a society as small as Islamabad, you don't want to talk about anything. You don't even breathe anything because you don't want to inadvertently break somebody's confidentiality. So that's where supervision and peer supervision is incredibly important. And also scheduling regular time off and time away from work.
What about compartmentalizing, in your head? Like, okay, this story, like you said, these are at the end of the day, human stories and human attachments, right? So till you don't get burnt out, and for you to not get burnt out, is compartmentalizing necessary?
Yeah, to a certain degree. So like the compartmentalization happens like at the end of your workday. You do have to compartmentalize all of it, right? Because you have to go and you have to take care of your family, and you have to socialize, and you have to, go out, and you have to live your own life, even after you've heard something absolutely horrifying. Even after you've heard of somebody's, trauma or abuse history, and where, your heart is really heavy. But then life, you have to go and live. And so yes, in those ways, yes, compartmentalization does help, but it's also really important to then address that. So for the moment, or for the day, or for the week, I might compartmentalize, but then I will have to process it with somebody, or in supervision, or on my own, even, in my notes. This client session brought up this for me, and this is how I'm working through it. So that's a really important part, because compartmentalization works in that moment or for that week, but it has to be addressed. So in areas where you're really struggling, you have to address it.
And otherwise it might turn into a suppressed kind of an emotion, right? I got it right.
Yeah, or it just create and it creates like an underlying stress.
Well, that was informative. Any parting notes, any parting message?
Value your mental health, value yourself, recognize that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. If you're not feeling right, seek help. If you've got a pain in your leg, you never hesitate to go to a doctor. So if you've got a pain somewhere else, if you've got a stress in your mind, if you've got brain fog, if you've got pressure, if you're feeling anxious, get help.
It's good to seek help. Perfect. Thank you so much, Eman. It was a lot of fun. We talked for almost 50 minutes, and we didn't even, I personally didn't feel like it at all. Thank you so much for doing this.
You've been so wonderful. Thank you so much.
You have a good day ahead.
Bye-bye. Bye.